Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ilias Grampas, and on behalf of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, I'm very happy to welcome you all to today's online event on revisiting odor pollution in Europe. This is, of course, a very timely discussion since regulating odor pollution is complicated. However, without a harmonized approach at an international or European level, addressing odors at local level then is quite challenging. So before we kick off today's discussion, I would like to take the opportunity to thank hosting MEP, Ms. Maria Spyraki, member of the European Parliament for the group of EPP, the European People's Party, and of course, co-chair of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development. At the same time, I would also like to warmly thank colleagues from MEO, CEST, the Mediterranean Information Office for Environment, Culture and Sustainable Development, as well as the EU-funded project Diagnosis for kindly co-organizing this webinar. Just before then passing the floor to Ms. Spyraki for her opening remarks, I would like to let you know that today's discussion will be moderated by Ms. Rosa Arias, odor expert and coordinator of the Diagnosis project. At the same time, we're very much interested in hearing from our audience as well, so I would like to invite participants to send us your questions during the event. For that, you can use the Q&As box of the platform, so feel free to choose the All Panelists option. Please remember to do that, and of course, within your question, please make sure to also note the speaker to whom your question is best addressed so that we can facilitate a fruitful discussion to follow. Once again, thank you all for joining us today, and without further ado, Ms. Spyraki, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ilias. Thank you all for organizing today's event. I would like to start with some opening remarks, and I would like to ask you for your understanding, because I have to leave this meeting from an hour since now. So, air pollution is a worldwide topic of concern for all countries, developed and developing, especially in the last 2 years that people spend more than 90% of their time in indoor environments. Consequently, indoor pollutant exposure may be important in population groups that spend the most time in enclosed indoor environments. Indoor air quality is strongly affected by volatile compounds in the air, which are emitting from, first of all, building materials, and also furnishing and people, as well as those brought indoors from the outdoor environment. Daily life sources for odors include human bioeffluents, environmental tobacco smoke, bioodorants released from fungus, perfume, cosmetics, and building materials. Occupants' complaints usually reveal indoor air problems. In fact, odor nuances are the second cause of environmental complaints after the noise. It is very, very important, and that's why I start by thanking you for organizing this event in order to raise awareness for this factor, which is finally downgrading our quality of life. And of course, it is first the noise, and it is second the odor problem. Indoor air quality influences the health and comfort of occupants. Most frequent indoor complaints related to indoor air quality are odor annoyance, irritation, head disease, and nausea. In addition, several scientific studies show that bad air quality negatively affects the productivity of office workers and students. Specifically, high concentration of carbon monoxide can cause drowsiness. Also, changes in the sensory environment affect individuals psychologically, and it is also very important, and change in psychological perspective inevitably result in behavioral changes. Therefore, behavior constitutes a key component of the sensory environment and plays an important role in assessing it. Air pollution and odor pollution are connected with indoor air quality, and it is often a symptom of broader environmental issues caused by population growth, urbanization, and industrialization. A survey 4 years ago from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, my home city in Greece, reported that 23% of the people living under energy poverty and 20% of the people with high incomes had been affected by outdoor odor pollution correlated with sanitary problems like poor waste management, and high concentration of CO2 and methane in the air. So odor pollution is not an issue that affects only the low income population, but extends to affecting the quality of life and has possible economic impacts. Therefore, odor manifestation should be considered as an alert signal and a potential call for an environmental impact assessment. Only recently, in the renovation wave, odor and indoor quality are stated in tackling energy poverty and waste performing buildings. According to the strategy we work upon in the INI report in the parliament that I was presenting the ENVI committee as rapporteur, inadequate comfort and sanitary conditions in housing and work environments, such as inadequate indoor temperatures, deficient air quality, and exposure to harmful chemicals and materials, contribute to lower productivity, health problems, and higher mortality and morbidity. It is important to understand that odor pollution is one of the facts which is finally influence our quality of life. Concluding, since COVID-19 pandemic was turned the spotlight on air quality, and in addition odor, it is now the perfect chance to discuss odor control management, to include it at the premise, and finally to establish a common way and streamlined approach and common criteria in the framework of energy poverty to impact our life. Thank you very much once again, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Spyraki, for your opening remarks, setting the scene very much with regards to the discussion to follow. So as we've touched upon at the start of this webinar, today's panel discussion will be moderated by Ms. Rosa Arias, Odour expert and coordinator of the DNOSES project, which stands for Distributed Network for Odor Sensing, Empowerment and Sustainability. So on this note, I'm delighted to introduce Ms. Arias and Mr. Sven Schade, who will be providing the introductory remarks of today's event for the next 20 minutes to follow. Rosa, with over 17 years of experience, is the coordinator of this key project, which has developed an innovative methodology to co-create alternative solutions to monitor odor pollution through citizen science, which produced well-rooted policy-society dialogues, a green paper, and a strategic roadmap for governance in odor pollution. So the proposed multi-level governance model will be presented today to introduce odor pollution in the policy agendas, moreover to also address the need for a common regulatory framework. Following the intervention of Rosa, Mr. Schade will be taking the floor for his intervention as well. Mr. Schade is a geospatial information scientist and works as a scientific officer for the European Commission's Joint Research Center, where he is leading research on the digital transformation of governance and the modernization of public services. So welcome, Sven, as well. Welcome, Rosa, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elias, and thank you, Mrs. Spyraki, for this wonderful introduction. Let me share my screen. I think that you can see it. If not, please let me know otherwise. Yes, and I will be introducing you the work that we have been doing during the DNOSES project, advocating for this new regulation or revisiting this odor pollution management in Europe for the past 3.5 years. And as Mrs. Spyraki said, odor pollution is not just a nuisance. In fact, it's the second reason for citizens' environmental complaints after noise across Europe, accounting for more than 30% of these complaints worldwide. Of course, there is evidence that the persistent exposure to ambient odors can have adverse effects that go beyond mere inconvenience in our health, like headache, anxiety, stress, lack of concentration, sleeping disorders, and even increased respiratory problems. And of course, it can have an economic impact, such as in tourism or in the loss of property values of affected communities. It also is connected to a fall of productivity, reduced economic activity, and lowered house and community prices. And the World Health Organization has already stated that odor nuisance affects our quality of life. And how this is traditionally managed. There are two methodologies standardized at the European level. One is dynamic olfactometry, but can only be used at the emission sources, so in the industrial activities, in the chimneys, in the basins, etc., that emit odors to calculate the concentration emitted. And then dispersion modeling is used to estimate the average impact over the population. The second methodology is field inspections, and it allows to estimate the frequency of the perceived odors in ambient air. And as you see here, both methodologies in the pictures, we need human noses as sensors to measure odors using any of these standardized techniques. But however, these techniques use a top-down approach. The studies are usually private, so there is no transparency, no communication with the citizens, or no access to environmental information. And also there is a lack of common regulation that leaves citizens defenseless when they are conviving with this problem. And this is what we are proposing, an approach to change the paradigm and change the top-down approach to a bottom-up approach, using the fact that our nose is the best sensor to measure ambient odors. And we want to provide citizens with a tool to monitor the perception of odor pollution as they are perceiving it, so from the receptor point of view, to complement the existing traditional methodologies. And this is how the whole idea of the noses came to life. We have been funded by the European Commission. It's a Horizon 2020 project running for the last 3 years and a half with a budget of 3 million euros and working in 9 countries with 14 partners. And we have been validating a new bottom-up methodology based on citizen science to promote participation, public participation in the monitoring and also in decision-making on other pollution in affected communities. So we have produced new sets of data to inform policymakers and also to optimize industrial processes. And also we have been working a lot to increase awareness of odor pollution at different levels, local, regional, national, European, and global. For us, it is very important to work with the quadruple helix approach to involve all the stakeholders in the solution of the problem. This means the odor emitting activities, of course, the affected communities, of course, the municipalities affected, but also the environmental authorities in charge of the problem, and of course, the experts, not only in odor pollution, but also in citizen science. Our ultimate goal has been to introduce odor pollution in the policy agendas, and that's why we are here today, at a global term and in a medium to long term. To do this, we produced some policy documents, such as the Green Paper and the Strategic Roadmap for Governance, which I will be presenting in a second. And why we have this complex panorama with odor pollution. First of all, regulating odor pollution is not straightforward. It's not, even though it's a similar problem such as noise, we do not have sonometers. Measuring odors is much more complex, and we need the human nose and its subjective perception to rely on the monitoring of odor pollution. That's why many countries worldwide still do not have regulations to deal with odor pollution. One of the techniques that I mentioned before, dynamic olfactometry, is the predominant methodology or in almost all countries all around the world, but it doesn't take into account the real perception of the affected communities. And when the regulations exist, they are quite heterogeneous. So they differ between European member states, between regions, and even between municipalities in the same country. In Europe, we address this through the Industrial Emissions Directive, mainly for the different industrial emissions, and with the compliance with the BREF recommendations. It's the most typical approach that regional governments use also to give permits to new installations. We have more than 30 BREFs in Europe for different industrial sectors that provide recommendations on the best available techniques. But however, these are not enough to regulate odor pollution, which is always a local problem, and these BREFs do not take into account the local context. Also, in addition, only in one of the BREFs, the one about waste treatment published in 2018, includes the first odor limit for biological treatment of waste at European level. There is no other limits in Europe apart from this one. So we need a multi-level governance model to tackle odor pollution. And why? Because the regulatory framework on odor pollution is different from country to country. For example, in Spain, municipalities have the competencies to regulate odors, so we need to work with them. In contrary, in Portugal, the competencies are at the national level. So in Portugal, they need to have first a national regulation on odor pollution to be then adopted at regional or local levels, which is totally the opposite situation as in Spain. So that's why in DNOSIS we produce this multi-level governance model that can work differently depending on the regulatory framework of each country, and we adopted it for each country to the different countries where we will work in to try to apply this new methodology and have a lot of policy societal dialogues to advance on the issue involving quadruple helix stakeholders. We also propose citizen science as a necessary methodology to tackle odor pollution. We created a methodology and a framework to be applied in the different pilots that we run, and that can be highly replicable in other affected communities and can even be the base for future regulations in odor pollution. And we wanted to involve stakeholders and especially affected communities from the very beginning of the problem definition, the pilot design, to then start gathering data with them and then analyzing this data and proposing actions. So we validated the data in 10 pilot case studies. In fact, we did one in Thessaloniki, in the area next to the refinery. So Ms. Spyraki, we can share the results with you if you are interested. And also in Spain, in Portugal, in Bulgaria, in Italy, in Germany, in the UK, and also in Chile and in Uganda. And the situations of all these affected communities were totally different. We work in rural areas, in urban areas, with industrial problems, with urban problems, etc. In all of them, we applied our methodology, which was highly adaptable, to produce these new sets of data that allow us to better understand the issue and try to act upon it with the participation of all the involved stakeholders. In all the pilots, most of them we use Odour Collect, which is an app that allows to co-create these collaborative odor maps in the affected communities with the participation of the neighbors. In the roundtable, we will have a testimony from the community champions from Barcelona, where we gather more than 600 observations. And like this, citizens are empowered to record their odor perceptions at any time, at any point of the map, when they perceive it, just by specifying the type and subtype of odor that they are smelling, the intensity and hedonic tone. This allows to correlate, to first identify the moments of maximum impact over the population and to correlate industrial operations to try to reduce this impact over the population. Also, we created the Odor Observatory to provide access to information, inspiration, and engagement. You can take a look if you are more interested. We have also some interactive maps, such as the map on regulations. We are mapping other regulations worldwide at different levels. We are also mapping affected communities worldwide. As you will see, there are a lot. And we try to do this to comply or to contribute to the compliance of Principle 10 of Rio Declaration, which advocates for access to information in environmental matters, public participation in decision-making, and access to environmental justice. And also we want to go one step beyond, promoting the citizens' right to contribute to data, not only access, but contribute to data with the citizen science methodology. And in fact, we were doing some advocacy actions on this regard to contribute to environmental monitoring. In 2018, we were in the meeting of the parties of the Aarhus Convention in Geneva, presenting a statement on the project. And just last week, there were some documents published, such as the recommendations on the more effective use of electronic information tools, where citizen science and citizen observatories is defined and recommended as a method by the Aarhus Convention. And finally, to conclude my intervention, I will very briefly present you the two main policy documents that we produced during the project. The first one is a strategic roadmap for Odour governance. In here, we were analyzing the regulatory framework of 11 countries, basically the countries where we have been working in the NOSIS, and we are providing recommendations to inform policymakers towards regulating Odour pollution, taking into account this multi-level governance model specific for their countries and the actions undertaken during the NOSIS. For example, we did some advances in Portugal. As I mentioned before, there is a need to create first a national regulation, and we have been working with the ministry and also the Portuguese Environment Agency to create this first national regulation in Odour pollution in the country. In Spain, we work more in the standardization aspect of the methodology because we believe that it's key to standardize this new methodology to be able to inform policies. So we have almost ready a standard which will be named Citizen Science for Odour monitoring, and it will be produced, finally published at the beginning of 2022. In Chile, we were also informing the first national regulation in Odour pollution for the pig sector because they want to have an approach, which I think is very valid, to regulate per industrial sector because not all the others are the same, not all the others cause the same nuisance. And in Colombia, we were also contributing to the regulations already in place. As a summary, our main objectives to work in this interface of science and policies was first to introduce this Odour pollution in the policy agendas and also to produce citizen-generated data to make informed decisions. And for us, the experience to have policy-societal dialogues has been crucial. And finally, the green paper that we produce provides a summary of all the findings and also the key messages addressed to policymakers to regulate Odour pollution. You will find there how we can turn this challenge into an opportunity, how you will find the explanation of in detail of our multi-level governance model and the European policy context. Also the description of citizen science as a necessary methodology to tackle Odour pollution. And finally, the Odour observatory to contribute, to environmental information. And we conclude with the way forward, trying to push this green paper towards a white paper. And we have a set of questions that can be used in the future for future consultations, include more stakeholders and produce with the involvement of us all this white paper on Odour pollution. And that's all. Thank you very much.
If I may, Elias.
Please.
I would like to thank you very much for this very important data and methodology and outcome you have already provided to us. And I would like to ask you if it's possible to keep in touch with my office in order to have the outcomes, especially when it comes to the Thessaloniki pilot project. It is a part of your project. You know that Greece is facing an open case in front of the European Court of Justice, so it is important to understand how will it work and how shall we proceed with this. Thank you very much once again, and allow me to leave due to my obligations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So on this note, I would like to provide the floor to Mr. Sven Schade. Sven, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Thank you very
Perfect.
much, Elias.
Thank you for joining us today, and I think we're all very much looking forward to your intervention.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk to you this morning about the potentials of citizen science for environmental policies. So basically, I will give you more the context, not from the angle of Odour explicitly, but really looking into the wider landscape of citizen science and citizen sensing for environmental issues. As introduced, I'm working for the European Commission's Joint Research Center, and we are actually looking into this use of citizen science in different sectors already for the past 6 or 7 years. And this is basically a structure that we use to talk about ways how we can interconnect data from citizen scientists, for example, from people sensing Odour, to policy-making processes. So basically what we are looking into is 3 classical steps in many citizen science projects, which is gathering of data, the validation and quality control with the peer community, and also the analysis and interpretation of data. So we see this happening in a lot of citizen science projects. But what is so important to us is actually connect those data sets as a knowledge source to evidence-based policymaking. So really the whole approach is to feed this knowledge generated by citizen scientists into established or emerging policymaking processes, to then also inform about political decisions which have been taken involving the knowledge as a source. And then after a political decision has been taken, there is of course a monitoring if a new policy actually is effective. And this monitoring links us back to data collection. So we really see almost a cyclic value chain, how to interconnect citizen science and policy. And you can imagine going through this cycle for many, many different topics. We have seen examples in biodiversity a lot for pollinators and for birds, but also many in the area of environmental pollution, including noise, including air quality, and also including odor. What you may also think of is applying this framework at a lot of different levels of administration. So you may think of this in a very local context, but also for the environmental monitoring in an entire country or across the European Union. And the latter is exactly what we are very much concerned with and which we are working on. And I just want to share a few of the experiences that we gained in the past with colleagues from the European Commission, the European Environment Agencies, and also a lot of the practitioners from the citizen science community. Already 4 years back, there was actually a fitness check of the environmental monitoring and reporting that is happening in the European Union at the European level. And of course, it was found that we are doing quite good, but we can do better. And there was a list of 10 actions how environmental monitoring and reporting can be improved. One of these actions, number 8, was to promote the use of citizen science. And we took this very close to our hearts together with colleagues from DG Environment, DG Research, and other parts of the Commission. We were basically first looking into a study where we investigated more than 500 different citizen science projects to actually identify how and which of them and with which impact they contribute to environmental policy. We then had an identification of barriers and possibilities and big stakeholder consultations over another 1.5 or 2 years. And finally, a year ago, we published a European Commission staff working document with the best practices in citizen science for environmental monitoring. So really trying to lay the groundwork how this interconnection can be improved. So basically, this document was published last summer, which includes many practices from a lot of different domains. And I'm happy to say that actually diagnosis is already included as one of the good practices, especially in an area which is not as much regulated than other environmental policy areas. So with this, I think it's safe to say that we really recognize the value of citizen science for existing policies and also supporting frameworks to connect citizen science better to policymaking do exist. There were follow-up activities after this work in the past. For example, the environmental protection agencies in many European countries are spearheading and championing new ways to interconnect citizen science and environmental monitoring, thereby really helping the implementation of these kind of new practices. And just a few months ago, we were also contacted by regional environmental protection agencies in Italy, which actually now do training based on these best practices to their staff, how to actually be open for integrating data from citizen science. So we really see a lot of momentum and a lot of good groundwork already available. And I want to just repeat what Rosa already indicated. Another big step was achieved just a week ago, where actually all the parties of the Aarhus Convention decided to also promote citizen science as part of the strategic plan to 2030. Again, there are more than 40, I think it's 46 countries supporting this Aarhus Convention, which is all about access to environmental information, public participation in decision-making, and access to justice. And the European Union countries is very much supporting these activities and was pushing these recommendations. And it's a big step forward because with this, we also make the closer link between citizen science, environmental rights, environmental democracy, and public participation. So you really see that there are many things already done and ready to be used. But I want to stress also for the remainder of this talk today, the session today, that there are at least two big challenges remaining. One of them is really to find ways to further streamline environment monitoring and co-create knowledge for environmental policy making across different levels of administration. So this is still an area which is heavily in need for more examples and more ways ahead. And actually what Rosa already indicated, DNOSES is an excellent example how to actually deal with this multi-level governance setting and also take account of many different countries and their contexts. The second big challenge is to not only use the data created for monitoring and getting better knowledge, but also to use that to empower the different stakeholders to resolve local issues and to reduce the burden of odor pollution locally and really have long-lasting solutions. Again, DNOSES also here is spearheading with brilliant examples from the 10 pilots that were carried out. And I hope you will also enjoy the rest of today's session, where you really will learn a lot more about the contributions of DNOSES, and you also will see how some of these big challenges can be further addressed. I stop here. I thank you very much again, and I hope you will very much enjoy the session.
Thanks very much, Sven, for your wonderful presentation as usual. And now I will introduce the roundtable, and I will give you the floor back at the end of the roundtable to participate in the debate and in the final remarks. Okay, so now let's find out what are the challenges related to odor pollution and its regulation from quadruple helix stakeholders' perspective. The panel discussion, just for you to know, will be structured in 4 sections. In the first section, each panelist will be asked a question and will have 5 minutes to answer. The second session is an open interaction between the panelists, where you will have the chance to openly discuss the most relevant challenges of regulating odor pollution. This session has a duration of 15 minutes, and you will be able to comment or ask questions to other panelists, since it will be an open debate, so please feel free to do that. And then each panelist will have 1 final minute for wrap up, the concluding remarks. And finally, we will be opening the floor to questions from the audience to all the panelists. So we strongly encourage the audience at any point to write your questions in the chat during the roundtable intervention, so that they can be answered in the last part of the session. Please include the name of the panelist to which you are addressing your questions. And let's start now with the roundtable. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce you the first speaker, who is an odor expert and happens to be the scientific manager of the DNOSES project. Dr. Laura Capelli is an associate professor at the Department of Chemistry, Materials and Chemical Engineering at the Technical University of Milano. She is scientific coordinator and organizer of the NOS International Conference Series on Environmental Odor Monitoring and Control. And Laura, I have a question for you.
Please.
Yes. So in your own words, there are no simple solutions to a complex issue such as odor pollution. So when it comes to environmental odor impact assessment, what is, in your opinion, an optimal approach for characterizing odor emissions and determining the exposure of affected communities to odors? What is missing to enrich the regulatory approach to the issue? Do you have any examples for us?
Thank you, Raza, for your question. How much time do I have, you said?
5 minutes?
Oh my God.
Yes.
This would require hours, this type of discussion, because as you said, and it's one of my favorite sentences, there are no simple solutions to complex problems. And environmental odor impact assessment is a complex problem. So to come to your first question, what is an optimal approach? The answer would be there isn't an optimal approach. It isn't possible to define one unique optimal approach that fits any possible problem, any possible issue, any possible situation, any possible community with its history, its background, its problems, its perception of the problem. So there isn't really an optimal approach. Let's say that experience has shown us that usually the optimal approach is to combine different approaches and to obtain as much information as possible to get a clear picture of the other issue. This is the first point. So what is missing? What is missing? Well, what is missing is exactly this. What is missing is that currently the existing standards regarding odor measurement methods are only referred to two techniques. The other ones are not standardized, or sometimes not even mentioned, whereas we know that the techniques for odor measurement are much more than this. What is missing? It is missing that most regulations currently, especially in Europe, but also elsewhere, are based on odor dispersion modeling, meaning that the sources are characterized by dynamic olfactometry, odor concentration is measured, and then these data are put into this calculator, in this dispersion model that somehow gives as a result the predicted impact on the surrounding territory. It is well known that this approach has big limitations related to different technical problems that probably it isn't worth deepening here. But let's say that in general, characterizing complex sources is a problem. There are no standardized way, no real agreement on how to determine odor emission rates. There is a problem related to the fact that dispersion modeling are often based on average data. And this makes that they do not really give a representation that is coherent, that is in agreement with what the perceptions from the community are. So what is missing is to add to the current methodologies something capable to take into account the effective perceptions of the population. And in this context, citizen science is a very powerful instrument because it allows to obtain spatially and time distributed data, a very high number of information which wouldn't be obtainable in other ways. So this is, in my opinion, a very powerful instrument that sometimes combined with other approaches, because as I said before, there isn't an optimal approach. So citizen science alone is probably not the solution to all problems, but it is for sure something that is necessary to integrate what we currently have. Examples are, I think that this project, the DNOSES project, has produced a lot of examples. All the pilots have been wonderful examples. All the pilots have been wonderful examples on how citizen science can help in getting a better picture of the whole problem. I think that I used my 5 minutes.
Perfect, Laura. Thank you so much. We will have time to discuss this deeper in a second. So let me introduce the next speaker. It's Benoit Serger. Sorry if I don't pronounce your name correctly. He is a team leader for industrial emissions in the C4 unit on industrial emissions safety at the Director General for Environment at the European Commission. Among others, Mr. Serger has contributed to the research on nuclear plants with several publications. So thank you very much, and let me ask your question. Since 2018, the European Commission is making efforts to introduce a more systematic approach to odor pollution monitoring and management. Under the Zero Pollution Action Plan and the revision process of the Industrial Emissions Directive, including the ongoing BATs and BREFs developments, such as the slaughterhouses BREF, for example, what can we expect to see regarding odor pollution management in the future?
Okay, thank you very much for your question, Rosa, and thank you very much for having me today. If I may, I will use just small slides, 5 or 6 slides to answer your question.
Yes, I think Regine needs to give you the control for sharing.
I think it's done. Let me just try if
Perfect.
it works, and let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
But do you see it in presentation mode?
Not yet. We are seeing slide 4 now. Yes, now we have the first one. Yeah, in presentation mode. Perfect.
Okay. Yes, so maybe what the Commission is doing in terms of odor emissions, you mentioned it already in your presentation, Rosa, and the main tool is the Industrial Emissions Directive. It is a very powerful tool. Why? First of all, because it covers a lot of installation, and let's say most of the large-scale installation, industrial installation in the EU. So it covers everything you can have in mind, from refineries, combustion plants, landfills, waste treatment, intensive rearing of peaks, etc., etc. So a lot of, let's say, odor-prone activities are covered by the ID. And you can see here the number of installations. It's quite impressive, in 52,000 across the EU. So it's, let's say, the most important legislative tool for industrial activities in the EU. And what is important to know also is that this is an integrated tool. It means that the ID doesn't cover only one aspect of, let's say, environmental pollution, but all aspects in an integrated manner. So of course, emissions to water, emissions to air, waste prevention and recovery, vibration, etc., etc. And amongst all these aspects, of course, odor. But we will not find directly in this text emission limits of odor, for example. The system is a bit more complex, and let's say that we have different pieces of legislation which explains all emission levels, all techniques which are to be used by different sectors. So these texts are called BAT conclusions, so best available techniques conclusions, in which you will find these emission levels, these best available techniques that each and every installation will have to use and apply across the EU. So this provision in the BAT conclusion are reflected in permits. Of course, then there is a monitoring of the emissions, there is inspections to be carried out by competent authority, and all this, let's say, package allows to have an idea of the environmental impact of the installations. And all this work, the definition of BAT conclusions, it's a cooperative process. So it means that it is not the Commission alone in its tower which defines what is BAT. It is really a cooperative work with member state experts, with industry experts, and with NGO experts to define what the BAT conclusions are for each sector. When it comes to odor in BAT conclusions, well, although we ask what's that the Commission started to work on this since 2018. In fact, I would maybe like to correct and to say that we started even earlier to work on this, but maybe more in a prominent manner recently, that's true. So in many sectorial BAT conclusions, so we will find at least one reference to an odor management plan, which means that it has to be carried out systematically by all installations. Odor management plan means a protocol listing actions, corrective actions to be carried out by the operator, timelines, protocol to conduct odor monitoring, as was mentioned by the previous speaker. Of course, we are talking here mainly of dynamic olfactometry. A protocol to respond to odor incidents and complaints. It means that the operator has to be organized to identify, list, and address each and every incident and complaint. And of course, program to prevent and reduce odor. In addition to this, we'll find very, let's say, technical measures to reduce odor emissions. It depends on which industrial process we are talking about. For example, it can be, I don't know, enclosure of some odorless waste, for example, can be an example. And we have indeed in one sector, so waste treatment sector, we have since 2018 emission levels for odor emissions. It means that for the permits of this installation, we need to have one emission limit for odor emissions based on these levels. And much more recently, we are now working on the BREF for slaughterhouses and animal byproducts, which obviously is a very odor-prone process also. We do have odor concentration levels for some specific processes within this sector. Of course, it's only a draft for the moment, but just to let you know that it is the Commission is still working on this aspect of odor monitoring and will continue in the coming years also on other industrial sectors. Thank you, Rosa. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, these are very good news, and let's hope that we can continue advancing on this regard. And let me introduce you the next speaker. Now we have the citizens' perspective. And in fact, Silvina Frusella is the president of AIRENet, an organization that represents more than 100,000 Spanish citizens deeply affected by urban and industrial contamination. Mr. Frusella is also Citizen Science Business Unit Manager at Basecamp World, and she has been the community champion, I would say, of the DNOSIS Barcelona pilot. So thank you very much, Silvina, for being here, and the floor is yours. Let me ask your question. We are discussing several approaches to odor pollution management and the complexity of measuring odors, as you very well know. But do you think that the participation of citizens can make a difference? What new knowledge or perspectives can citizens bring to the process? What would you say to those in charge of regulating to increase trust in citizen-generated data in relation to odor pollution? Do you think that this data can be useful to inform local policies or regulations, for example, by setting odor perception limits based on the other observations from the citizens?
Okay, thank you. Hello all. Thank you, Rosa and European Parliament for this invitation. As Rosa well said, I represent AIRENet. We are based in Barcelona, and we also work to improve environmental and health conditions in Barcelona and two nearby cities, which are Sant Adrià de Besòs and Badalona. We have actively participated from DNOSIS pilot at the Forum of Barcelona, and as Rosa well said, this is a zone that is greatly affected by odors generated by a variety of industries present in this area. And participating from this pilot gave us the opportunity to collaborate with information about the affection we are suffering, and also to provide data to diagnose and hopefully to improve this situation. When speaking of environmental issues such as odor pollution, there are, in my opinion, two main perspectives: the planet perspective, its conservation and sustainability, and the people's perspective, the citizen perspective. And that's it. There are no other fundamental axles for these matters. Odor pollution would not probably be a problem if there weren't people affected. For an industry, emitting odors is a problem because of the affection they cause on neighborhoods, on workers, on nearby cities. So if we agree that on people being considered as a fundamental variable regarding odor pollution, I guess we should also agree that the information that people can provide is vital. Citizen information is so fundamental and so powerful that it cannot be compared to any other methodology to measure or diagnose odor pollution. There is no other technique in the world that can tell us how odors affect people. You may measure how many odor units an industry emits, but this says nothing about how citizens are affected by this. Citizens' participation can tell us how it smells, when it smells, the intensity of odors, and even how effective or not a potential improvement measure would be. Citizen science provides key data to tackle, diagnose, and solve odor pollution issues. And it definitely can be used to inform regulation and local policies. After all, any other regulation intends to improve living conditions, and there is no better information to base on but the one that citizens can provide. And keep in mind also that there is no better sensor of odors than our noses. This is something that the Noses Project always said, and we deeply agree with this. Finally, I want to say that we citizens are happy to collaborate if this collaboration generates improvement. But unfortunately, on way too many occasions, we see that the expected answer from public administrations does not come. We collaborate so that later on, public administrations do their part, inform and put in place regulations, act on industries, on issues that affect people. But this is not quite happening. Do you know which is the major obstacle to the implementation of citizen science-based projects for odor pollution diagnosis? Do you know which one it is? I guess you guessed. Industries and public administrations. These are the two main obstacles when implementing a citizen science-based odor study or project. And why is this? Because they prefer not to showcase the problem, even when it is a very well-known problem and everyone knows about it. But they prefer to contract a traditional study and treat the problem in private, just in case they decide to do nothing about it. We citizens should be collaborating for our future, to define how to live better. Instead, we are now embracing activism to overcome past issues that are affecting our present and that threaten our future. And the ones that have been elected to grant our welfare are not acting, or are acting slowly, or are acting little or late. We are living a time of pompous climate emergency declarations, empty climate emergency declarations, declarations with very little real actions. To give an example, Barcelona has not been up to air quality European standards for more than a decade now, a decade. The air we breathe in Barcelona is poisonous. What are public administrations doing about this? Little. There are zones as Santa Maria de Besós in the limit with Barcelona and many other places in the world that are literally sacrifice zones. There are people being sacrificed for the sake of industries. People sacrifice so that everyone can continue their business as usual. And public administrations just attend to these scenarios as outsiders. Or even worse, not only they do not act to correct these injustices, but help through regulations to create environmental ignorance and bring an unreal sense of calm and that everything is under control. Regulations are made up to business needs and to ensure nothing changes. It is time to stop this blindness and to inform regulations that are truly based on citizen needs. It is time to listen to people, to all people. It is time to make inclusion real and to put problems on the table and to look for and implement real solutions. And I think the European Parliament has a key role at doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Silvina, for this emotive, I could say, testimony as an affected citizen, in fact, also from the Odour pollution. It has been wonderful to have your perspective here to enrich the debate and demonstrate the urgency and the need for action. So thank you very much. And let me introduce our next speaker. This is Joachim Coetet, maybe not correct. Chairman of the European Group of the International Solid Waste Association, also a partner in the NOSIS, and Managing Director of the Extended Producing Responsibility Alliance. Mr. Queden has been working in the field of producer responsibility, especially with regard to packaging since 1992. And let me ask the question for you to have the industrial perspective now. The waste sector is, of course, one of the main industrial sectors producing other complaints in the surrounding of treatment activities. However, we all generate waste. Joachim, based on your experience, do you think that citizen science for monitoring other pollution can be an asset for improved management in the waste sector? Could citizen participation in the process boost a sense of co-responsibility and be beneficial at the same time to advance towards zero waste?
I think I have to represent bad industry today, but I hope from my experience and my work up to now in Germany and in Europe, our inhabitants are key for our sector, both for the municipal waste management sector, but especially also for extended producer responsibility. Yeah? Because if our inhabitants are not doing their job, not sorting their packaging in the best possible way, it creates a lot of problems later on for the waste sector. Also for the odor, of course. If we mix too much, then we have odor problems more than it is needed. So we feel that this idea with the citizen participation is the best way forward, even if we have limits. I think especially the nose, everyone has a different feeling whether something is too much or not too much. And if we are able to explain our inhabitants why there is odor, why something is happening, I think you feel it already in your kitchen when you are sorting your waste. If you open the waste bin, it smells. So of course, if you put hundreds of waste bins together, it even smells more. If you go to a sorting plant, I don't know whether you have been to a sorting plant, this has a special smell, and you even can differentiate between the regions and countries. They have different smells. So I think the only way to have an agreement somehow, a compromise, is to make the people aware why certain things happen, so they understand the reason. Of course, we have always to try to be up to date with the technology so that we avoid as much as odor as possible. That's I think that is clear. And of course, if a new plant is permitted, we have to take into account the distance to the next people, and when there is new housing allowed coming closer to the plant, of course this has to be a factor, and this has to be understood. If you study German law, this is one of the first cases you learn a problem for a plant. If the inhabitants are coming closer and closer, what to do then? So I think this is a combination of several topics, and the project gets from ISWA the full support, and only involving we can reach a problem. I think if we ignore the inhabitants, this will lead to activists, and then we have a real problem. So that's why I think this is a great project which gets from ISWA its full support, and yes, we hope that it will make the next steps even more into European legislation and a standard for all of us, and not only another piece of paper. It has to be implemented from the heart in the companies with the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Yes, and you addressed one of the points that we didn't touch yet, which is urban planning. Super important also to try to avoid or reduce this problem. So yes, this is another thing that we need to look into. Thank you very much. So let me continue with our next speaker, Marike. Are you here? Yes. Marike Schouten is alderman of the municipality of Nieuwegein. I don't know, you are having a lot of trouble today with the names, and rapporteur of the Committee of the Regions, opinion of the EU Action Plan towards zero pollution for air, water and soil. In the Committee of the Regions, she is also part of the Commission for Territorial Cohesion Policy and the European Budget, and the Commission for Environment, Climate Change and Energy. So thank you very much for being here, Marike. And let me ask your question. Cities and regions are at the forefront of implementing policies related to pollution, including other pollution, of course. Has the issue been on the agenda of the European Committee of the Regions, considering that other pollution is mainly a local issue that could be managed from a regional perspective? If yes, how? And if not, how do you think that the Green Paper on other pollution can support you in bringing the issue higher on the committee's agenda, particularly in light of the launch of the Zero Pollution Stakeholders Platform with the European Commission last June?
Thank you very much, Rosa, and thank you to Mrs. Spyraki as well for organizing this event. Yes, I am a member of the Committee of the Regions, which is a consultative body for the European Commission, and rapporteur of the Zero Pollution Action Plan. You have two very clear questions, and thank you for these questions. About the opinion that we are preparing at the moment on the Zero Pollution Action Plan that will be discussed second half of November and finalized in January. And that's a planning which is that is important to keep in mind. And the Committee of the Regions advises on laws and regulations that do have a big impact on local communities, local governments, about 70%. So in that sense, to have the input through local governments and communities is really important. About the opinion or the Zero Pollution Action Plan, Odour was not mentioned explicitly as a separate topic. But still there are elements of interest that we should take into account. Into the synopsis of the consultations, there is a reference made to odor pollution, and that's important. And the action plan also includes the revision of the Industrial Emissions Directive. And Mr. Benoit Zerger already talked about it, and I would really support what he was saying. It is a very important piece of legislation or that we should follow. So I won't repeat what he has said, but I thought, yes, very important. The Green Paper on odor pollution also mentions the IID legislation and confirms the relevance. So that's to stress the importance, which is again expected in the coming months. And we, from the Committee of the Regions, do then assess the possibilities to produce a legislative opinion to contribute to the debate. So that's again something to watch. I don't know which way it will go, but an important thing to watch. It would be a good occasion to discuss this topic. The Green Paper also mentions the multi-level governance. And I think it is important, and I think some of the previous speakers also mentioned it, odor pollution has often a very strong local dimension, so to say. The previous speaker talked even about different smells, different countries, maybe from the same producer, which I didn't know, by the way. So that was an interesting piece of information. And something that is very specific for neighborhoods even, so for communities and neighborhoods, which means that, again, the Committee of the Regions made an opinion last year, and that's called Towards Sustainable Neighborhoods and Small Communities, Environmental Policy Below Municipal Level. And that really highlights the importance of the role of smaller municipalities. And I could invite you to take action on taking with this paper in your hands, so to say, because that might help. But it could be an important tool.
Mhm.
There is another important tool, and you might already be aware of it, and that's the importance of a correct application of the Habitats Directive to protect the Natura 2000 areas. So that's another important piece of paper, piece of legislation that could be an important tool. Your question was also about the upcoming launch of the Zero Pollution Action Platform that has just been launched. And again, with the aim to define how you can reach together a common vision on zero pollution objectives. The invite to join the platform is still open, and the deadline is the 3rd of November. So I would like to take this occasion as well to really say, please know the invitation is still open to join the network. Make use of it, because again, it is an important platform to follow which developments take place, but also to know where you can tag in to act. So these are a few points which I think could be of importance. And here I would like to stop, Rosa. With again, a big thank you.
No, we can thank you to you. Thank you so much. Yes, I will take a look and try to join the network if it's still open. That's very good news as well. And now we finish the round of questions for you all. And I would like to invite Sven also again to the table and open the debate between you, because probably you have some comments on the other speakers. So I can ask you more questions, but it could be nicer if you want to comment on some other speakers' opinions. So do you want that someone wants to start with the conversation? Yes, Marike?
Yeah, sorry to take the floor just after I finished taking the floor. What I really liked about, some of you also mentioned the importance of citizens in different ways. And when I was preparing for this meeting, I came across an article written by, I should quote him, Anton van Harreveld. He writes about the history of Odour. And he writes about the big stink. I don't know whether you are aware of that in London. The River Thames, heavily polluted. And the government of the UK at that time did not decide to start a sewage system because of the pollution, but because of the complaints on the odor. And I don't think times has changed. Yeah, they have changed. They have changed in a very big way even. Maybe it's more, it's not even a question. I think I would support the importance of citizens to take a role in monitoring and also giving voice sometimes to the effects of odor. And maybe I can phrase it into a question with those who are experts on the issue, because sometimes you need multiple entrances to tackle the issue. And it seems that air pollution is much higher on the agenda than odor. And there is probably a link between both. How can we use the interventions on air pollution, or to reduce air pollution, to also tackle odor pollution? Thank you,
Yes.
Rosa.
Thank you. No, I will leave the floor to Laura in a second, but I just want to mention that we worked with John just yesterday, Laura and myself, because we were in another conference for 2 days taking place in Bilbao, so we know him very, very, very well. And thank you for mentioning the article. In fact, he has been one of the initiators of the standardization of dynamic olfactometry in the Netherlands first and then in Europe. So yes, and we have, in fact, an example from our project related to the example that you mentioned in London, because we were working in Uganda. And yes, it is true that the perception of odors is totally different from country to country. It's anthropologically, culturally different. And in that country, in fact, they are not aware of air pollution, but they are aware, citizens living in Kampala are not aware that the air is polluted, but they are aware of the odors that they are smelling. So in that country, we saw that the main issue for them is the odor, but tackling odor pollution, we can improve at the same time air quality. We were working there with markets and waste management in markets due to different sanitary issues and poor waste management. And in fact, for them, the call for action was the smell. It was not concerns about air pollution. But yeah, so this is another example, real example from the Denosis project, and I will leave the floor to Laura to answer your question.
See, I'm not really sure that I got the question. So maybe if you could repeat it, it would help me in trying to answer.
May I, Rosa?
Yes, you can go.
Yeah. Well, I think quite often in a European context, at least in the Western European context, air pollution is seen as much higher prioritized than, at least on a national level, I'm not talking about local, but national level, than odor pollution. So is there a way to address odor pollution through addressing air pollution? And if so, how?
Wow, that is a difficult question. Indeed, it's true that air pollution is sometimes seen as a higher priority. I think that what we need, and I think the two types of problems are quite different anyway, because with the air pollution, you have a history of techniques that can be used to carry out measurements, which doesn't mean that they are banal at all, because for those who have tried to do some chemical analysis, it's not obvious. But it's clear that with odor we have a further problem, which is the fact that it is a sensation. And so the real problem is that in order to really tackle odor pollution as air pollution, we need to be able to quantify odors in a way that isn't questionable. And in my opinion, it's a problem of education of people, because the experience that I have as another expert, and that I had very strongly when starting the pilot case study in Italy, I realized that not only citizens, but also plant managers, institutions, the mayors of the municipalities that were involved in the project, which were 3 in our case, they did not even know that odors could be measured. They had no idea. It's like they just consider it as an endemic thing of air, and that do not really know that this can be measured and that this can be treated as a pollutant. And I can remember, as I started working at the university measuring odors, I was looked by the colleagues as a serious B engineer, because yes, these are the ones working with smells. Like it was like more playing around and really doing science. And I think we need to really change this paradigm by educating people. So it is very important that we try to communicate and to teach to people that there is a way to quantify odor. It's not easy. That has become clear meanwhile, but it can be done. It can be done in different ways. Citizens are a key element in that. And I think that this is the first thing that we really need to do to bring odor pollution in the minds of people closer to odor pollution, to air pollution.
Mm-hmm. And there is also another link to air pollution, very clear one, which is the methane. Methane is one of the main odorants that are causing complaints around basically landfills and also livestock facilities. So methane, of course, is one of the main greenhouse gases. So we can link also here just by reducing odors, we will be reducing methane emissions and thus mitigating climate change somehow. So this is another important connection with air pollution, I would add, in case it helps. But of course, educating, yes, and raising awareness, this is something that we have been trying to do a lot in the project. And I saw a question from Sven in the chat that I think it can, I will let you, Sven, raise the question, because I think it's a very important question in terms of credibility and trust from what we are proposing here to monitor odor pollution, also for environmental authorities and also for industrial activities to believe, no, we are, of course, it is very challenging to measure odors, but citizen data can be trusted. So please, Sven, you can ask the question.
I think Benoit wanted to react to the previous discussion. No? That,
Hi, sorry, I didn't see you. If it's the case, please go ahead then.
Yeah, sorry, I think I use the real life on raise function, and it doesn't matter, no problem at all. Yeah, just to react on the previous issue about connection between odor and air pollution, I think there's another connection which is on emissions, because you can have clear correlation between emissions of odor and emissions of pollutant. I'm thinking of some organic compound, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, you mentioned methane also, Rosa. So in that case, you can have clear correlation between odor and pollutant emissions.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, and in fact, another connection that we can make is with health. But this is another step.
Which is much more complicated.
Much more complicated and a big research gap as well.
But sorry, I cannot stay still. Methane is odorless. So not really methane that is connected to odor. It's true that methane is one greenhouse gas, and the connection is more than methane. It's all what comes together with
yes,
methane,
exactly.
which is extremely odorous in the case of landfills, because it's not only methane, it's coming together with hydrogen sulfide, which is, and here I come to the health again, because hydrogen sulfide is highly toxic for human health. And so the link is very, very strict between air pollution and odors. Although, let me say, it is important that we don't reduce the problem of odors to the problem of single compounds. It is important that we do not the mistake that chemists usually do, that try to oversimplify the problem by looking just at one tracer, at one compound. The challenging thing about odors is that it is given by a mixture of compounds. That is a more complex issue, and it's not about the single molecules, but it's on their effect on the noses of people. And that is exactly why people are so important in the process of monitoring odors.
Yes, thanks for the clarification, Laura. You are totally right. I was referring to the mixture, but I always oversimplified to methane. But anyway, yes, now it's time for Sven.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I will ask the question I put already in our internal chat. I have another question on health. Maybe we have time for that later. But first of all, I really, when listening, and also when listening to Joachim saying it is on the effect of people, but then if we don't act, people become activists, and then we get into a problem. So basically, my question is more, how can we deal with potential biases that we introduce by allowing these processes? Because at the end, we may only listen to those people which either scream the most or know how we get the data. So I'm really wondering if you could say something. I'm not sure if this is again for Laura or for Rosa, how we can really offer everyone a possibility to complain about the odors, and also to hear to everyone, to listen to everyone, and not only to those which are the most activists.
Thank you, Sven. Yeah, I will give the floor to Laura in a minute, but we try to use this highly inclusive approach to reach not only the usual suspects or people super activists or to participate in our pilots, but everybody that is affected, because in fact others democratize society because we are all affected by them. And we have been having pilots, for example, in Barcelona with different types of social realities conviving there. Depressed areas with new refurbished areas, new harbor, conference centers, hotels, and all of them are affected the same way by the others. So what we try is to adapt the methodology and adapt also our data collection tools and maybe change into paper so that they can collect data even though they do not have access to technology or their digital literacy is not high enough to use an app such as Odour Collect. We try to change the approach and engage them all in the process. But related to plausibility or validity of the data, I will refer to Laura for you. And well, and finally, before, just to mention that doing citizen science is doing science. We cannot forget that. Also, other experts are not Class B engineers, as Laura was mentioning. It's very, very hard to measure others. And in fact, we use the same methods for validating data as in any other types of science or scientific fields. But I will give the floor to Laura to provide the details on this.
I think that the first part of the answer is fantastic. You have to be as inclusive as you can. So try to really give voice to everybody, reach everybody in every possible way. So engaging people through invitations, through going to the places, and really try to involve as many people as possible. This is, let's say, the human side. But now, and in this, I'm not a citizen science expert, so I think that Rosa has explained it much better than I could do. As a scientist, and not a Series B scientist, of course, I believe that the real point is that you have to treat these data as numbers, as scientific numbers. This is the key point. It's not listening only at the loudest. It's treating data like they are numbers and adopting a precise scientific method to analyze them, to evaluate them, and to validate them. Validation of such numbers is complex. Yes, it's true. Validation and plausibility check is something we are still debating. So I have no real answer on how to validate this observation in a unique way, in a certain way. There are different approaches that can be carried out, looking at the correspondence of several numbers of observation, using inverse dispersion modeling techniques, which is probably the most complex method. So we have really a wide range of possibilities, from the easiest ones to the most complex ones. But the point is really starting to look at other measurements as not more as an art, but as a science.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Laura.
Rosa, if you
yes,
allow
Selena,
me, just,
please.
Yeah, I think that Sven's question is very it's very good for this moment and for this session, because especially odor pollution is something. It's an area where everyone can contribute. You always said everyone has nose, everyone has nose. So one of the key aspects for us being a pilot for the noses was the possibility to include a real great variety of people. As Rosa said, people from different ages, different educational levels, social levels, and they could understand that odors can be measured, which was a big news for most people because they didn't know that they could be measured. And we did a lot of activities together with the noses, or led by the noses, to inform people and to help them contribute. For example, we used to perform some sensory walks, and so we went to all the facilities and helped them identify which type of odor comes from any plant or from any source, so that when they give information, it's more reliable, because you can distinguish the odor that comes from waste from the odor of purifying water plant, for example. So I guess that citizen science gives the tools for everyone to contribute, and this is the beauty of this science. Later on, as it has already been said, as Laura said, there is the human part and this the scientific part. But related to the human part, I think there is no other technique, no other methodology as inclusive as citizen science for tackling odor pollution, which is something that on many occasions cannot be done for air pollution, because air pollution, on most occasions, you don't even realize that you are breathing poisonous air. You don't know, but you can smell. Everyone can smell. So it's very important that we give people tools to contribute and that we are really inclusive. So that's why I think that this is the future. This is starting as a present, but I think that citizen science applied to odor pollution is the future, because it's the area where everyone can contribute and can give the real feeling of how this problem is affecting.
Thank you, Silvina. In fact, if I can add to this, we always get this question, no? That is this data reliable? If people are angry, are they not reporting all the time just to complain when there is no others? And in fact, we were analyzing scientifically the data, and this was not the case. But in fact, we have the means to remove complaints or other observations in case that they are not true. But because our methodology is also based on creating dialogues, increasing trust, etc., and putting together all the stakeholders to work together and to discuss on the issue, at the end, nobody wants to do that, wants to trick or to lie about the observations that they are having, because all the stakeholders, the industries, the administrations, the citizens, all of them want to contribute to solving or understanding better the problem. And for example, in Barcelona, we had 600 observations with the collaboration of 86 citizens. We ran the pilot for more than 12 months with some problems related with the pandemic at the end, but with a big participation. And yesterday at the conference, someone asked me, are 86 citizens a lot, enough, too much? And in fact, we are having this discussion also in the Spanish standardization working group on the methodology, and we have not defined yet the minimum number of citizens participating to be able to consider the contributions valid. But in Barcelona, what we saw is that we started running a small pilot with a reduced participation. Maybe Silvina, you remember better than myself, but probably we were mostly 15 people or something like that. And we were, these 15 citizens were recording observations for a period of 1 month, more or less, or 1 month and a half. And from that period, with that reduced number of people, only 15, that were the first one testing the methodology, and that's why we wanted to have a reduced control group to see if it was working well or not. We already got the same numbers that we got at the end of the project. So the results show for this beta pilot, as we called it, that 52% of the time the smells came from the wastewater treatment plant, 25% of the time the smells came from the waste treatment facility, and this was the same percentage after 12 months and with the participation of 86 people. And all the proportions of the observations were always the same during all the time. So this shows the power and the validity of the data obtained and the trustfulness that we can have on this methodology.
Yes, and also in this area, there had been previously a lot of traditional studies that also stated or conclude the same. So it's very interesting to compare that people's information resulted in certain conclusions, and these conclusions were exactly the same that were detected by traditional study. But doing it through citizen science, I think that it's very representative because you can, when you, for example, perform a traditional study, you are never sure about the area affected. But as in citizen science approach, this is very open. So anyone that smells at home or work or whatever can add, and so you can have a better sight of the area which is really affected. And I think it was very interesting to compare traditional conclusions to this one and to see that they were really very representative.
Yes, thank you, Silvina. I have some questions from the audience. I will launch the first one, and you can feel free to contribute. The first question is from Celia Roniotis, and the question is as follows. Trust seems to be a prerequisite for a solution in the European Commission's policy-making processes, even more at the local level. In your opinion, how can building more trust be enhanced? In fact, it's very, very related to what we were discussing, but maybe we can listen to your views from the Commission.
So I guess the question is for me. Yeah, I can only answer for the European Commission processes, not for the other ones. But if I take the example of the brief, for example, it's already possible to make comments on the draft documents. This being said, it's maybe not a good example because, of course, at European level, we will address the problem which are common to all European member states. So it means, for example, if I take the example of waste treatment, we will address 4,000 or 5,000 installations concerned by this brief. So it's very difficult to address local issue in this with these processes. So here we aim more at addressing the problem, let's say, where the European Union can add the most value. It means at the European level for all installations.
Mm-hmm. And Benoit, maybe I'm not sure how this can be controlled, but how this works is working in practice. I mean, because from 2019 we have this first Odour limit in this brief for the biological treatment of waste, and how can we know if installations at the local level, no, in any member state are obliged now to comply with this, but if they are really controlling it, I mean, how can we know how is this working in practice?
Well, in practice, each installation has 4 years to implement the BT conclusion. So 2018 until 2022. And then the permits are public and the result of emission monitoring are public also. So it's a good way for citizens to see what was done concretely at the level of the competent authority at local, on regional, national level to, let's say, implement this brief and BT conclusions.
Very nice. Does anyone wants to complement the answer?
Can I add to that one?
Yes, for sure.
Because basically, I think this is also part of the challenge if we address issues at local level. Of course, a lot of local issues have to be addressed and solved at the local level. So the trust needs to be to the local stakeholders or the stakeholders involved in a particular context. So indeed, from the view of the Commission, we can give overall frameworks and guidance and help sharing good practices. But especially when it comes to citizen science and more localized solutions, there is really a need to look at this multi-level governance. And you had this nice slide earlier, Rosa, where you also see that we need different mechanisms at the different administrative levels. And of course, then the trust has to be propagated through that.
Yes, challenging. Marieke, yes.
Yeah, I always feel that both are very much needed, this local and European. And trust plays a role in everything at the moment, and I think that's everywhere in our member states. And I often say locally, but listen, we are the European Union. It's not Brussels. We are, and of course, I know that doesn't always bring the message across. But the causes of Odour pollution are often also outside of our borders. They are inside, but also outside. And again, yeah, I am I'm, I'm very much in favor of including citizens in this whole issue. And here I will stop, otherwise I will repeat what everybody else already said.
No, thank you. And this is also an issue, for example, when you have one emitting activity affecting several municipalities and you have, it belongs only to one, but then who is taking care of the management? The other municipalities are complaining to the municipality in charge or where this industry belongs, and it even complicates further the problem that, of course, we don't have a common framework. No? So what can you do, or who is obliging who, or who needs to take action? No? On this, it's very, very complex. So thank you. I have another question from Irina Tarakskisi. Sorry about this. This is the most complex surname that I read today. She mentions that in Lithuania, we questioned residents of one city on others where there were a lot of complaints. Analyzing the results, we came to the conclusion that public reaction was emotional and gave little data to work with the other issue in that city. Complaints of others often are related to fear of air pollution with hazardous chemicals. Are there specific conditions for citizen questioning on other? Are there specific conditions for citizen questioning on other? I don't understand very well the question. Maybe someone can, but I think that what she's saying is that in Lithuania they try, but with questionnaires to understand the complaints, but they came to the conclusion that the public reaction was emotional and gave little data to work with the other issue in the city. So what can we answer to Irina?
I can say something about that based on my experience. In the past, as doing other types of measurements, people who know me a little bit know that I am a fan of electronic noses, for instance, and of sensor systems to monitor different things. We had also tried in the past to question citizens in order to compare the outputs of the electronic noses with their impressions. And I must admit that my experience was also very negative. The answers were often emotional. The comments that were written on the questionnaires were sometimes not repeatable in a civil context. And so I had also this bad past experience. And I think the key element is that it is not sufficient to distribute questionnaires. It's all the work that is done before that is important, the engagement, the building the trust, the quadruple helix model, the bringing different people to talk together. This is needed before starting the collection of data. And we have learned it very well with the DNOS methodology. And I had a completely different experience now by applying the methodology proposed by the project in our case study. If you see, data collection is not the first point. It's like point 4 or 5 in the methodology. So there is the framing the problem, that bringing identifying the stakeholders, and so on. So there is a lot of work that has to be done before you start collecting the data. And I think this can help in getting less emotional answers. Then a part of it will still be affected by emotions and so on. And that is where plausibility checks and validations comes in place. So I really think it's a question of doing the process in a very complete way, and really creating this dialogue between the different stakeholders that can help in getting better results.
Thank you, Laura. I will encourage Irina to take a look at one of our results, which is the do-it-yourself guidelines for replicability, where you have like a step-by-step advices and to apply the methodology if you need to run a different study, or we can have a discussion later if you want. And Sven, please.
Just a very, very short addition to it. Actually, if there are these kind of emotional inputs in a city from citizens, it could be a good start for this process. And I just want to say, You don't have to say, oh no, what you're providing actually is wrong, but it can actually be the very first step to initiate the process and then do a more scientific data collection a bit further down the line.
Mm. Yeah, maybe Silvina, you can mention how was your emotional connection before entering the project, because you were really involved before knowing the gnosis.
Yeah, of course there is an emotional connection because it's something that affects your everyday life. But something we learned is that through a citizen science project, we could transform our emotions or our complaints, you say, into information. And there is a sense of contribution whenever you are angry, because you are angry if you really have smells that are bothering you. So you are angry, but instead of complaining or calling a number to the public authorities, which are not going to do anything with that call, you grab your mobile phone and say, okay, I'm going to put the information here. And as you know that what you are giving, the information you are giving, it's going to, or you expect it's going to be translated into solutions. So, so you collaborate. Our experience is that people collaborate as reliable as possible. Of course, that they are angry and you cannot change that. But you also know that it's good to identify properly the type of odor you are suffering. And also, it is true that maybe there are some observations that come from people that are so angry that they rate it the maximum because they are very angry. But it's also true that people are not so constant. So maybe you do it once or you do it twice, but then later on, as it's not a very quick response to your information, later on, people who just want to show their anger get tired and do not do it anymore. So I think that when you have a relevant quantity of citizens participating, you get an accurate view of what is happening. For us, it was a way to transform our complaints into information, and that gives you a sense of contribution.
Thank you, Silvina, very much. And before moving to your one final minute of final remarks, I would like to ask Joachim from the industrial perspective, because we had several issues in some of the pilots to get the collaboration of the industries. In some other cases, it was the other way around, and they were the municipalities, the ones that didn't want to appear on the map as a city that smell, no? So it's not always the case that the industry is against. But we strongly believe that we are producing these new sets of data that can really inform the emitting activities to see detect the maximum impacts from the point of view of the affected population, and then act and create affordable management plans or slightly change their operations to reduce this impact based on this data. Do you have any recommendations for us to talk to the industry so that they can be more easily engaged in the process?
I think perhaps you can remind them that this should be a part of their risk management, because medium-sized and bigger companies usually have or should have a risk management. And I think all the possible emissions should be part of it. And so this is a way that you can tackle a matter before it becomes a problem. So I think that is, for me, something of a responsible company that they should take care of as well. And if you want to do business, you have to have the acceptance of your neighborhoods. That would be logical for me. And so perhaps to remind them of this as well, that it's not enough to produce some nice brochures where you write sustainability report on, but you have to make it in life, take it to action, and this is important.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, we will try to use this strategy in the future to see if it works better. Thank you very much. And I will continue to close the roundtable with a quick round with you so that you can provide your remarks. I will be using the same order that we used before. So Laura, if you please, you can start.
Yes, thank you. Well, we have heard a lot about citizens, and I think that one key message is that it is really important that we try to integrate the current regulatory approaches about odors with the methods that are able to account for odor annoyance as perceived by the citizens, not just as modeled by mathematics. And of course, to do this, standardization of the method is a key element. And also what is needed, what is the ultimate goal, I would say, is a sort of common guideline or framework to obtain a little bit more of homogenization of the odor regulation approaches that are currently present across European countries.
Thank you, Laura, very much. Benoit, your turn.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rosa. Well, I would like to say that it seems to me from this panel that we have some tools which can be done at European level, which are very powerful, like the Industrial Emission Directive. But these tools I think, are complementary to other tools which can be used at local level. And in that sense, I would like to praise very much your project, this, Rosa, because I think it's a clear example of what citizen science can do at local level. It gives us a clear idea of what the different legal frameworks are, which are very complex with several levels of let's say of administration. And also, I would say that one other aspect that really I found interesting in your project also, that maybe was not mentioned so far, is the digital part. The fact that we can use apps on mobile phone to have a direct and live co-creation of maps, I would say, for odor monitoring, and I find it very interesting. So probably for us, something to investigate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. Silvina, what is your view?
Okay. Well, I would like to, in my final minute, to talk to the representatives of the European Parliament present in this session. Let me tell you that you have a key role at making things happen. So I would ask you to help stop greenwashing. Help us grant that the voice of the citizens is truly listened by generating spaces where citizens can discuss proposals, discuss needs. Also help us to have more citizen science-based projects, and also by demanding these projects and by granting real outcomes and solutions. Odor pollution is very disturbing for people, but even though there are not regulations in most cities, and as we have already commented, it's not treated as an important problem. So we need regulations. We need way too more citizen science-based projects to tackle odor pollution, and we need concrete solutions. Because if there is not a real outcome, people get tired. We collaborate because we want to improve our work, but if you don't do your part, we get tired, and we will not continue collaborating for nothing. So that's important to understand and to do what you have to do to get people collaborating and improving our work.
Thank you, Silvina.
Thank you
Totally
so much.
understandable. Thank you very much. Joachim, please go ahead.
Yeah, the ISWA people, when I talked about the event today and the project, they told me that there's full support from our community for the project, and we think that this is very important. And the second topic I would like to share is that it is so important to understand the needs of the various regions all over Europe. Huh? The world is not the same if we look from our Brussels offices out of the windows. This is not Europe. This is a very tiny part. And I have the feeling, very often the feeling, speaking with my EXPRA members all over Europe, that the realities are not really taken into account. On the Greek islands, in Lithuania, in Norway, and so on, the world is different and the needs are different. And this is the role of the European Parliament. You are elected from the people. So to bring sometimes a bit more reality to the desk officers in the Commission, and nothing against the Commission, don't take me wrong, but this is somehow the role of the Committee of the Regions of the European Parliament, and I would really like to remind us of this function in between the process.
Thank you, Joachim. Thank you very much. Marike, your turn.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think the Joachim, your call, I think, is very clear, and that you are very right. This is the role of the Committee of the Regions to voice the differences that we do see in our within Europe. So that point is very well taken. And I think I mentioned two things which I would like to repeat, and that is the possibility for us to consider a produce a legislative opinion when the IED revision is forthcoming. So that's one. And I would also like to repeat the invite for the platform, the Zero Pollution Action Stakeholders Platform, for which the first meeting is planned on the 16th of December. And maybe thirdly, and that I think that's very much based on the input that I have heard today, is when we do discuss our opinion in the Committee of the Regions, so our own opinion, whether we should still consider amending it and adding something on odor pollution. That's something I would really need to look into further, but I think that's what I take away from this platform and from this discussion. Thank you, Rosa.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, at least for considering this is a very big step. So thank you very much. And Sven, please, the floor is yours.
Yes. So first of all, it was really good to see that a lot of our messages we had today really fit well together. So we were not fighting. So I think actually that's already an achievement. And the overall vision certainly is there, which is fantastic. I still see a big question on how we could really also look more into the possible role for public authorities at different administrative levels. As said before, Commission or European level, national, but also regional and local, that we can really experiment and eventually also establish with the required legal, organizational, and technical capacities to really offer these opportunities to participate to every European citizen. So we basically see great examples, a lot of local things, but it's not for everyone. So how do we really get into a systemic setup which could help us to find local solutions, but which could also help us to actually test regulation before it's putting into place?
Yes,
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Sven. Yes, that's a very huge challenge. That's why we try to provide a replicable methodology as much as possible, adaptable. So, of course, needs to be applied at the local level, but have the potential of being replicated elsewhere. So thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful for your contributions today to the panel. It has been wonderful and a wonderful closure for our project. So yes, thank you so much for being here, and let's keep in touch for future actions. I will close now the round table here, and I will continue with my final remarks before giving the floor back to Elias to close the event. So thank you very much for being here today. And let me finish with my final remarks. As we have seen today, odor pollution is the second cause of environmental complaints across Europe, and there are hundreds of affected communities, unprotected citizens with limited quality of life due to the lack of a common regulatory framework in Europe. Odor pollution is not just a nuisance, so the need for action is urgent, with the growing recognition at all levels of the harmful effects of bad air quality on people's health. However, odor pollution, other regulations across Europe and within countries differ significantly from each other or even are inexistent. We urgently need that policymakers seriously take this into consideration. The Green Paper and the Strategic Roadmap for Odor Governance, which advocates for the need of a bottom-up, multi-level governance model in odor pollution within Europe in order to protect the affected citizens and support the environmental authorities and emitting activities, are here for you as recommendations. We will have a long way to go, since odor pollution is not tackled in the Zero Pollution Action Plan, nor in the recently approved European Green Deal. Here, we have already missed a great opportunity to be more environmentally sustainable and to protect citizens' health and life. But real life is even more stubborn, where studies show that odor nuisance causes dangerous effects on affected communities, such as headaches, sleeplessness, stress, anxiety, nausea, respiratory problems, or even psychological effects. Not only that, but also studies have shown the economic reality of odor nuisance as connected to a fall in productivity, reduced economic activity in sectors such as tourism, and reduced property of values and community prices. The problem comes when this is not taken into account in any regulation, leaving citizens, countries, and municipalities unarmed. Alarmingly, odor pollution is an underrepresented concern in environmental regulations globally, and Europe needs to urgently hear the voices of affected communities. As we have explained, odors are addressed at European level through the Industrial Emissions Directive. However, odor has not been recognized yet as a pollutant. Even though there are more than 30 BREFs in Europe, only one provides the first European odor limit, the bad conclusions for waste treatment. But BREFs are not complete nor consider local context, making permits difficult to obtain and represent a huge barrier for citizens and industries to understand the regulative framework. In comparison with other kinds of pollutants, such as noise, water, or air, odor pollution does not have any specific directive that limits other nuisances with clear thresholds for different scenarios and industrial sectors. And European citizens need to be incorporated into the dialogue and in the solution. The Denosis project has widely demonstrated that citizen-generated data is an excellent tool to complement existing measurement techniques to better understand the problem and work towards solutions with the participation of all the involved parties. European citizens have the right to participate in decision-making in a matter that directly affects their quality of life, contributing to participatory democracy. For instance, the Odor Observatory and the Odor Collect apps were created to provide useful information about odors for everyone. They are the first of their kind, allowing access to justice in odor pollution and giving the right of everybody to contribute to odor information. We are calling for action to recognize odor as a pollutant by European institutions and in European regulations to provide guidance to the member states and the municipalities that will protect in turn their affected communities. Introducing citizen science for adherence to Principle 10 not only addresses the right to access data, but a right that is perhaps even more basic, the citizen's right to contribute to data. Inasmuch as a transparent democracy demands the ability of all to produce understandable, valid data, this can not only be within the purview of scientists, industries, or environmental authorities acting as gatekeepers of what information will be produced or can be accessed. In applying this approach, we would not only enhance policy-society relations, but also strengthen environmental decisions through participatory democracy, as well as the accountability and transparency of our institutions. I would love to express my infinite gratitude to Maria Spyraki for her support and for being one of the first in caring about the introduction of a common framework for odor pollution in Europe. And my thanks also to all the speakers and all the institutions, organizations, industries, and thousands of citizens who have helped us in undertaking the Denosis pilots, disseminating the project, validating the data, deploying a wide range of advocacy actions, and contributing to raising awareness on odor pollution at the local, regional, national, European, and international levels. Without their contribution, this event and the whole work on raising awareness in odor pollution in the Denosis project would have not existed. So thank you very much. I leave the floor back to Elias to close the event now.
Thank you very much, Rosa, for moderating today's discussion in such an interactive and stimulating manner, but also for providing the event's summary remarks so very much to the point. I would like to take the opportunity to also thank hosting MEP, Ms. Maria Spyraki, for taking the lead with regards to the organization of today's event, but also to the Mediterranean Information Office for Environment, Culture and Sustainable Development, as well as Dean Noses project for their key work, and of course to our excellent set of speakers for their very insightful contributions, and last but not least to the viewers of this webinar as well for their active engagement concerning addressing odor pollution in Europe with us today. As we are wrapping today's webinar, I would, on behalf of the Secretariat of the European Parliament Intergroup, I would like to once again thank you for being with us today. Very much looking forward to continuing the debate in the future. So until then, stay safe and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elias. Bye-bye.